Welcome, everybody. We're here in early November with Dave Morgan, Derek Bain, and George Christidis, either former or current editor of Clay Minerals, the journal. We're doing these interviews as part of the Clay Minerals Group Jubilee year celebrations. Clay Minerals Group celebrates its 75th birthday this year, making it one of the oldest in the world, I think. As part of our celebrations, we're doing these interviews with people from all across the community and the society, and these will be kept on our website for our posterity. They're stored on YouTube. So I'm going to start off with some questions about your background. Derek, maybe we'll go to you first. How did you get inspired to become a clay mineralogist, and what impressed you so much about the science that you wanted to do that?
Well, I did a degree in geology at Aberdeen University, and then went to the Macaulay Institute. And at that point, I knew virtually nothing about clays, actually, because the geology department in Aberdeen is very much a hard rock department. We did cover clays, but in a very minimal way. But I went into the pedology department, which is headed by R.C. Mackenzie. But the person that really got me involved was Jeff Wilson.
Oh.
Jeff took me under his wing and got involved in the kind of work he was doing. And that's how I got involved in clays. But clays are never really my sole focus in research. It was really just part of weathering studies I was doing. But that's where it all started.
Okay, all right. So did you do your PhD when you were at the Macaulay then?
Yes, I did. After I went to the
okay.
institute. Yeah, that's right.
That's one thing I've learned today. I didn't know that. Okay. How about you, Dave? What was your background to it? What inspired you?
Well, to go back to the beginning, believe it or not, Mintock had a role.
Oh.
I was at home in North Wales in the late summer of 1965. It's a long time ago, following graduation from King's in London. I had no fixed plans, and I was trying to decide between two job offers: a geologist with the Open Cast Coal Board in South Wales, and a lab job with the British Ceramic Research Association in Stoke-on-Trent. Then, well, out of the blue came a letter from Bob Howie, who was reader in geology at King's at the time, mentioning that at the MinSoc Council meeting, another member, Tom Deems, had said that the labs of the Overseas Geological Survey were looking for an assistant experimental officer. Now, this seemed a much better idea to me because my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, was starting a one-year postgrad course at London University's Bedford College. So I started in October 65 in the labs of the OGS, working under Jim Bain, Derek's big brother. And Jim had been trying single-handedly to establish our studies in and thermal analysis techniques in the OGS labs. I found both work areas fascinating, and Jim was a very supportive boss and very encouraging, and I went on from there.
Mighty oaks from acorns grow, clearly.
Yeah.
Derek, I guess the interesting point about that, Dave's report there, is that you didn't take inspiration from your big brother, as he puts it. That was nothing to do. It was more to do with getting a job in the Macaulay for you.
Well, I suppose I got inspiration from him in the sense that when he was studying geology at Aberdeen as well, and I went out with him in the field. He was collecting rock samples from around the northeast of Scotland for the local art gallery, and he was 20 at the time. Now, would have been about 9 years old. He's 11 years older than me, and that's how I got involved in geology. So he did inspire me in that sense. But after that, it was a question of what jobs are available. One job I could have had was with Anglo-American in Africa, I think. But I preferred the lab job, and the Macaulay job happened to be available at the time. So Jim did have an influence. He still does.
I often wondered if there was some background in that with you. You know somebody for 30 years and you still don't know how they got into the subject. It's interesting. George, what about you? What was your inspiration?
Well, I think it was more or less the same as Derek and Dave. I would say that it was by chance. When I was doing the topic of my diploma thesis in the university was the study of the alterations in a hydrothermal field in southeast Greece. So we had a collection of thin sections, but there was also a report by a geothermal energy company who was talking about clay minerals at the moment. So it was my idea when I got the cuttings, the drilling cuttings, to see if there are any clays from the leaders. We did not have any training in the university about clays, how to separate clay fractions, and so on. So I had to say that I had some rough time. There were some people who are doing this job on a very elementary level. But anyway, I did some separations, and what was fascinating was the application of ethylene glycol solvation when I saw the shift of a peak after the saturation. So the solvation. So this was the first inspiration. And then when I went to the UK, to Hull, I was determined to study clays, actually bentonites. I had some contact with then silver and barytes who provided samples. They allowed me to sample their deposits. And this was the onset of my work with bentonites. And then I continued in Leicester, of course. Dave knows about it because he was the external examiner of my thesis, my PhD thesis. So this was how I was involved. Now, to get involved in one thing, in something is one thing. To continue is another. So I think that's my main motivation to continue was the quality of people that I met. I don't know what happens in other disciplines of earth sciences, but the clay people are unique people, and I had a chance to meet some interesting chaps in conferences every now and then. The first one was in 1990 in a conference in Manchester. Actually, this was my first international conference, and I had the chance to meet Warren Huff at that conference, who gave me an idea that was proved to be very interesting and quite useful in my PhD studies. I discussed about this thing long after that with Warren, and it was okay. And the people in the business, the clay business, are really special people. I don't know why, but they are okay for some reason. No offense to other earth sciences, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think we'd all agree with that sentiment, George. When did you first arrive in the UK then? When did you first go to Hull?
It was back in 1988. I had a scholarship from my country. It was a good grant, actually, for 3 years, and then it was extended for another year. Sorry, for 6 months. But I had saved some money from this scholarship. It was, as I said, generous enough. And I stayed for another 6 months. So it was enough to complete my PhD thesis.
You all had a very different route into the subject, and maybe designed with slightly different priorities in mind. Dave, your thermal analysis, maybe there was overseas resources in mind. What maybe tell us a little bit about that. What was the purpose of you being hired for your job? What was the reason for you? Why did they need you?
Well, that was a time when there was a residue of the colonial past, and we still had geologists attached, I think, as part of the aid assignment to a number of overseas geological surveys in Africa, and they were always sending samples which possibly could be of use. And so my background has always been the economic aspect of clay mineralogy. And really, we find to do that, you need to find out how much of the active ingredient is in the sample that you're looking at.
Right.
And that really governed the nature of the work I was doing. Thermal analysis was one way of quantifying certain clay minerals.
Sure. And did you come across any large deposits that went on to become economic?
Not really. No, we just wrote the report, sent them back, and then waited for the next lot of samples.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
That was in the early days, though.
Okay.
Control then.
Sure. Okay. And Derek, for you, you said it was mostly soils. Did that
Yes.
branch out into materials to do with the North Sea at all while you were working there?
No, not really. I did. I was involved initially with X-ray diffraction and thermal analysis a little bit under R.C. Mackenzie, but was also involved with X-ray fluorescence when that came along, and we did one or two things for North Sea Oil Company under contract. It's just a question of doing analysis, whether it was XRD or XRF, and supplying the results to the companies. I never really got involved all that much with the North Sea Oil people. No.
Okay.
Maybe it was a missed opportunity. I don't know.
But
that was 1966. I joined the Macquarie, and that's when they were recruiting quite a lot of people for various things, and they wanted somebody to boost up the weathering side of things, and that's that's the route I took. Yeah.
Okay. It always struck me that so much of what we published in clay minerals was to do with, for UK-based authors, was to do with the North Sea. And we'll come to the journal in a little while. But it's interesting that being as close as you were, that your focus was on soils rather than on the hydrocarbons.
Well, that's what I was employed to do.
Yeah, indeed. How about you, George? What was your role has always been academic, as I understand it, but I presume you've dabbled in industry as well and worked with industrial materials.
Yes, indeed. I think that first, okay, I am an academic, but we are in technical university, which means that we train engineers. This means that our research has to be focused on applications, for good or bad. And I say for good or bad because the problem with clays is that they're so fine grained, and they have so unique properties that unless you understand the properties of the minerals which constitute the clay itself, you will not understand the behavior then in the industry. So this is a real challenge. I mean, to try to interpret the behavior of the material as an end product to industrial applications, of course, based, of course, on the particular mineralogy and chemistry and crystal chemistry, I would say. This as a general, I would say, attitude, my general attitude towards the clay business. There are many people who work nowadays in similar topics, and it seems to me that research is more or less is more oriented to applied subjects. Has become very applied as time is passing by, and we are neglecting basic research, which will be I don't want to use the term disasters, but it will cause difficulties in. We need basic research.
Yeah, I think I agree that the fundamentals will always be needed. But you're right. I think when we look at the tables of contents in all of the clay journals now, it's very much applied.
Yeah.
Maybe start with George in this next question. To follow up on the point you've just made, I'm sure that when Derek and David were at the start of their careers, there were clearly big questions that we needed to answer. Are those big questions all answered now, and have we got new ones, or do we still have some of the old ones that we started out with? What do you think, George?
Well, several of the questions have been answered, but there are still open things to be answered, in my opinion. For instance, we still don't know, in the case of smectites, we still don't know why smectites swell and why some other smectites do not swell. We don't know yet exactly. There are some hints about that. I'm talking about smectites that have been treated the same way. Okay, rendered sodium or lithium homoionic. Still, some of them swell more than others. Is it layer charge? Layer charge is let's say a unit cell property. It's not a macroscopic property, and swelling is a macroscopic property. So these are things to be answered. It's difficult. It's a very difficult question. But for me, some things which are now open is the reaction, for instance, with clay, between clays and microorganisms. It's something to, I mean, it's a new world, relatively new world, which emerged over the past, I would say 10 years. I'm talking about intensity because several people were working with this interaction since the 70s or even earlier. But there is a wealth of research over the last 10 years, 10, 15 years, I would say. And we need to learn more, of course. The other thing that I see increasing through the years, especially recent years, is the use of high-tech techniques. I mean, we have new tools nowadays to characterize clay minerals, and we were able to look in detail on the structure of clay minerals, and not only mainly on the structure. So we understand better things that we were not able to understand a few decades ago, and we're simply or merely interpreting what we're looking at or what we're seeing, but without proof. So, for instance, still we don't have structure for smectites, for instance. There is no refined structure for smectite. We believe that this is something to be solved in the future. I believe that the introduction of these techniques will boost the clay research in the future.
Thanks, George. Dave, what do you think?
Well, I've been out of active clay science for well over 20 years now, so I can't really give a technical answer like George has done, but I'd rather approach this from another angle. What does society need from clay science to get us out of the mess that we're making of our planet? And two things spring to mind. Perhaps greater emphasis will be required on the use of clays in mitigating environmental contamination. I know enough, there's a lot of research being done at the moment, but I think we need to strengthen that and increase studies on clay minerals in relation to combating the loss of soil fertility, because we need to feed an increasing population. And well, again, it's not a new idea, and I see there is a review paper in clay minerals just coming out by 3 Chinese authors on engineering clay minerals to manage the functions of soils.
Derek.
Well, like Dave, I've been out of the business for almost 20 years as well, and I haven't really kept up with the literature in recent years, so I really got nothing to add to what, very interested to hear what George was saying in particular. He's obviously much more up to date than I am, certainly. But I think using clays and the interaction with biological substances is something that Jeff Wilson, for example, was involved in a number of years ago. And I think that's I get the impression anyway, without being up to date with the literature, that's something could still be pursued with some beneficial effects.
Well, MinSoc now has a geomicrobiology group, so that tells you the direction of travel for the interaction between minerals and microbes is becoming increasingly importantly, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm going to drift on to working on the journal in a moment. But before I do, I've got another question to ask you all, which is, what's your favorite mineral? Your favorite clay mineral? Sorry, I should be more specific. Derek.
I thought about that when you sent us the list of questions. I can't come up with an answer, actually.
Come on, there must be one that you like.
Well, my PhD was in the weathering of chlorite. I've always taken an interest in what happens to chlorite and weathering regimes. But whether you regard chlorite as a clay mineral or just a primary mineral, I'm not sure. But I found that a difficult question to answer. Sorry.
That's all right. I think we can count chlorite. Yeah, that's fair enough. Dave, what about you?
Well, I think I'm possibly going to fight with George on this, but smectite in all its forms, bentonite, fuller's earth, smectite. I suppose I'm biased because it's the subject of my PhD. But it's such a versatile mineral with a wide range of industrial applications. And in the 1990s, VGS received a significant amount of funding from a number of international aid agencies to conduct workshops on laboratory and field assessment of industrial minerals in developing countries worldwide. And when we asked the recipient country which mineral commodities they'd like us to concentrate on, bentonite always topped the list.
Really? That's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting.
So we bored for England on bentonite, I'm afraid.
George.
Well, you know the answer for me. Yeah, Dave, answered for me as well. The beauty of smectite is that it's totally disordered, and it's this disorder which makes the let's say which saves the day. Well, outside of my office, in my door, I have a small. Well, it's a part of a poem by a French poem of a French poet, who says that order is the pleasure of reason, but disorder is the delight of imagination. Which means that, okay, it says everything, but the thing is that because we don't, there's a huge number of scientists working on these particular minerals, peculiar minerals, and still we don't know them. We don't know them, for instance. Everything that we show in papers and so on are approximate structures. So this is the reason for which I decided to devote, let's say, at least 50, 60, 70% of my research so far, probably more than that. And I'm still working on it. Okay.
So if we could understand them, and it was, and you know, if we could get a grip on this disorder, it would no longer be delightful. Then is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, it will be a boring material.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it'll ever be that. I'm not sure we'll ever fully understand all its ways. Clearly, the reason we have the three of you together today is because you either are involved or have been involved as a principal editor of the magnificent journal Clay Minerals. Missing today is Chun Hui Zhou, who's George's co-principal editor, appointed at the start of this year. As we said earlier, he's involved in a conference in China at the moment this week, so not unable to join us. I will try and include some answers from him in the questions in a text form when I hear back from him. Also, missing from today's discussion is John Adams. And John certainly served a good decade as principal editor of Clay Minerals as well, and I think that's a badge of honor you're probably all quite proud to wear. Dave, how long were you in the hot seat?
I think about 8 years.
Okay. And that was in the 80s, I'm guessing, so wasn't it?
78, I think I started.
78, okay. And so, Derek, you started in 86 then, I guess, is that right, about then?
86 or 87, I think.
Yeah.
I think it might have been 87, anyway.
And
So,
how long were you in charge?
I was just looking that up, actually, 2001.
Right, okay. 15 years.
Yeah, it was a long time, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was good.
Right.
Things changed a lot in that time.
Certainly did. Certainly did. Yeah, I'm going to come to that in a second. And George, how many years have you been doing this now? I mean, I know the answer, but the people watching this video don't. So.
Okay, then. So yes, I took over from John on in January 2013. So this December I will complete 10 years.
10 years. Okay. So that's in itself is a significant amount of time as well, isn't it? So,
yeah.
So I always think that the world of publishing began to change probably at the start of your tenure, Derek, and I joined the MinSoc in 1990, and from then onwards it's been a sort of a a whole storm of change, like the likes that were never seen since the start of publishing. I'm guessing. What was the impact for you on the changeover from, we used to, an author's manuscript used to have to be reset by a typesetter and pick out all the mistakes afterwards, and from somebody typesetting into taking an electronic manuscript that somebody had created and using their typing rather than somebody else's. So was that a big change that for you? Did that change the workload?
No, that particular aspect didn't change the workload much, but what did change the fact that when I started off, everything was done by mail, and manuscripts came in the post. You sent the manuscripts out. You had to photocopy them, send it out by mail to reviewers, and everything was done that way. That was before the days of email, which makes me sound very old, actually. but I think communication is an important part of the whole process. And when it went down to email and the internet and so on, that was a huge change. You could do things much more quickly, much more efficiently. And I can remember when I started off, the associate editor for France was Hélène Souquet, and we used to correspond. I used to write to her in my pidgin French, and she would reply in her best English. And but we neither of us were very good at it, but we got the job done. But it just shows how things have changed dramatically. I mean, here we are now. We don't even need to contact each other by email. We're looking at each other. We're talking to each other through the internet. I mean, it's an enormous change. But the side of it, from once the paper is accepted and gone to the printer, that obviously changed a lot as well, as you just described. But that didn't affect me particularly directly.
Okay. Dave, for you, some of those technological changes hadn't landed yet. So you spent your entire period working the old-fashioned way, if I can say.
Yes. Well, and every 3 months I felt an enormous relief at holding in my hand the latest because just to enlarge on what Derek has been saying, the sheer logistics of assembling an issue, and you start with receipt of the original typescript, sending this out to referees, receiving their comments, writing to the authors, receiving the revised typescript, marking this up, sending to the printers, then receiving the author's corrected proofs, approving their changes and possibly adding some extras of my own, sending these off to the printers, and finally receiving the final proofs and sending them back. And needless to say, we were heavily reliant on the postal system.
Sure.
And contributed significantly to their income, I think, worldwide.
Yeah.
And as I was a stamp collector at the time, I was very gratified to receive envelopes. And people must have realized and tried to bribe the editor, because most of the envelopes I received, large sort of A4 envelopes, were covered in stamps. Well, of course, I was incorruptible.
Absolutely. No question about that at all. No question about that at all. So George, for you, it's all been done in the electronic environment, hasn't it? What have been the things that you've been noticing changing over the period of time?
Well, actually, when I took over from John, we still okay. Everything was electronically. Okay, we did not receive, the submission was electronic, but it was traditional still. I mean, we received the new manuscripts in the form of emails. So there was not a central tracking system. And what was happening was we had to be after the reviewers, myself. Now we have the big brother is the tracking system, so it does it for us. Although it's not perfect, but at least we have less work to do. When I took over from John, the system, okay, the submission of new manuscripts was mainly online, mainly by email. But what changed in I think 2015 was the change to the new tracking system, with initially with Allen Press, and this was the reason for which the copy editor, this amazing man, Andrew. I mean, he did not want to continue under the new electronic system, so we had to change. Andrew Clark, who was amazing, actually, very efficient, and I mean, very, very easy to work with. I think that you know him very well. But as I said, as I had begun saying before the interruption, what has changed dramatically since the time that David and Derek were editors was that we shifted from what I call the scientific era to what I call the commercial era, because in the older times, people were looking to submit. We're looking for a good name in a particular scientific field to submit their research work. Nowadays, it's not a good journal or what we call a good journal. It's something that has changed, and this changed since the mid of 2000s. Well, I think it was 2004 or 2005, something like this, when the term of impact factor emerged, and the criteria have changed. So with Chun Hui, we are struggling to increase the impact factor of the journal. We have succeeded to double, actually. It's last year was 1.74, something like this. But still we are low. And this is one of my big anxieties, actually, great anxieties as an editor, how to increase it further. The change in the era, in the tracking system was not only necessary, but it was imperative, I would say, because we realized that the journal was almost, how can I call it, not ignored, but it was not accessible by big audiences, scientific audiences, especially those emerging in the East Asia, like India or China. So this is something that is something new which did not exist in the past, and this is, let's say, now something that happens in our everyday life. Now, by shifting to the new publishing system with under CUP, I have to say that the journal has has been accessible to large scientific audiences in Asia, especially Asia, because something that I had not realized when I took over as an editor was that, I mean, China has a population of 1.4 billion people, which means the population is 4 times that of Europe. Okay, so we have, or the United States. So we have 4 times more scientists, and it's really a big market. This is something, I suppose, that's big publishing houses like Elsevier or whatever. They knew it because it's their business, but small scientific societies which have offered great. Which have done great job for science, were not competitive in this aspect because simply they could not, the content was not visible. So to these emerging countries, which means that the journal should, in order to survive, it had to go to change the status. So we shifted to, it was a wise decision to shift to a big publisher like CUP. And now what we have seen is, first, the readability of the journal has increased. And we have, now we count the readability by the number of downloads. This is the new, fruit that appeared on our table, which is okay. It's fair enough. We have to learn, how to to compete. It's new for us as well. We're learning as well. But as I said, it's a continuous struggle. We have to learn how to work, to collaborate with them, to work with their system. We cannot change their system. We have to change our system, and this takes time. But it's interesting. To learn the new thing.
Thanks, George. I think you've touched on many of the aspects that have changed. Impact factor, access to the journal is completely different. 2023, we will have no printed copies of Clay Minerals at all. It'll all be online only. When I first came to the MinSoc, I think we were printing 800 or 900 copies every issue. So I think that's a huge change, and I kind of like the fact that we're no longer worried about printing and shipping that many copies of a journal around the world. I think it's a good thing from an environmental perspective and from a scientific one. The thing that stays the same, of course, that we haven't touched on, is that we still have to have the best quality science that we can manage through the editorial process. So making sure that the papers that we accept for publication are of a high standard, and then using the best production standards possible. And with all of the modern advances, it still takes a human being with those skills and the determination to get it right to produce a quality. David, question for you. What was the hardest thing you had to do as an editor? What was the most difficult single task? And I don't mean the general day-to-day stuff, but we all have those reviews that come back which are pretty damning, and then the author is pretty thorny about it. Was that where your difficulties arose, or was it something else?
Well, yes. I suppose when you become an editor, you have to be prepared to back your judgment and go with the referee's comments. And having said that, I've disappointed quite a few authors that way. But equally, I've disappointed a referee. I lost one in one notorious instance, and that was in 1983. Paul Nadeau and colleagues at the Macaulay Institute submitted a paper on a new concept of interparticle diffraction, which attempted to explain the XRD profiles of interstratified or mixed layer clays in a different way. I sent the paper to two referees, one in the UK and one in France. The French referee felt that the paper contained some interesting ideas, but the UK one was less than convinced. Anyway, I ended up publishing the paper. It generated a lot of interest and moved the debate on, which is, what science is all about. And being a bit streetwise, undoubtedly increased the citation index and impact factor of the journal. But I lost one hell of a good referee that way, because I never dared ask him again.
Right.
If I can comment on that, David, I think you're very brave and did the right thing, because that was a very important paper. I wasn't involved in it myself. It was the Paul Nadeau and Jeff Wilson in particular. I can guess who the referee was. I won't name him, but there's one very eminent person, a clay mineralogist, who was very damning about the whole thing. Yeah. But I admire you for going ahead with that one. That was a very important decision, I think.
What about you, Derek?
Sorry,
in terms of what was it that you found difficult to handle? I mean, I think those sorts of very editorial decisions, when you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, always struck me. I've never been in that position, but always struck me as the most challenging.
Yes, I think keeping an eye on reviews. Most referees, reviewers are very fair in their comments, but you always had to check what they were saying. There's one particular instance that I got I can only describe as nasty review from quite a well-known person, actually, who shall remain nameless. And I decided just not to use that one and went with the other reviewers who were critical as well, but in a more constructive way. But this particular review was destructive in a nasty sort of way. And I thought, well, this is not good enough. I mean, the author's quite a young person. It could quite damage somebody's career in a way, sending on that kind of thing. But it was only one. I think only once in the whole time I was there did I actually get a review as bad as that. So I'm pleased to say most reviewers are very helpful and constructive.
Yeah. What about you, George?
Well, more or less the same. Although the situation has changed over the years. For me, nowadays the difficult part is to find reliable reviewers and experienced reviewers who would be willing to review a paper. Okay, I have to inform David and Derek that the structure of the journal has changed. So what happens is me and Chun Hui, well, we are not handling many papers now. Only, well, say 3, 4, 5 maximum per year, and the rest are distributed to associate editors. So the editorial board has changed, and the former editorial members of the editorial board are now associate editors who handle papers. So, but from what I look at the tracking system, it's quite difficult to find, let's say, high quality reviewers nowadays. So this is a discussion that we have in the editorial board meetings and so forth. So this is actually a difficulty. I remember the time that I took over, Enver Murad resigned, not because of me, but because he sent a letter, an interesting letter, saying that he fed up losing time. And he mentioned one case in which he had 13 people refusing to review a paper that asked them for review. So things have changed. There are many reasons for that, but anyway. So for me, the difficult thing is to find reliable reviewers. And it seems that the people that we know have either retired, I mean, people who we would trust by experience or from experience, is that they have resigned or they're not interested in reviewing. And so we rely more and more in younger people who are tougher reviewers, of course. This is another experience that it seems that the older you become, the more senior you become, the softer you become.
I'm going to, at this point, add into the video a list of the people who work as editorial board members for the journal, and I'd like those who have served in that role in the past to take a little nod of pride as well, because in essence, those are the people that keep the journal rolling from one end of the year to the next. But this list is definitely one that I'm very proud of, full of people I'm very proud to work with. I'm sure George as well. They're unfailingly helpful, and many have been serving in that capacity for many years, like Enver did. So guys, we're coming close to the end of our chat. I just had one other question for you all, if I may, please. But what's your proudest moment as an editor? It may be, I suspect, to go back to Dave's one, where he took his courage in his hands and went with that paper when it wasn't universally popular. I'll start with you, Dave, being the senior member.
Well, being involved from the beginning with the Special Issues Initiative in the early 1980s, which everybody knows, or everybody in the clay field knows. Chris Jeans established a series of Cambridge conferences on the importance of clays in the discovery and recovery of hydrocarbons. raised considerable amounts of money from exploration companies to subsidise both the actual conferences and the publications of the proceedings. And the Clay Minerals Committee decided that Clay Minerals should publish these proceedings. And this involved establishing a fifth or extra issue in the year, so the publication of papers received in the normal way wouldn't be delayed. And these special issues were very successful in raising the profile of the journal.
Mm-hmm.
And a number of others followed on different topics. But they did involve a lot of extra work. And again, talking about help, we had to draft in guest editors. So I think that really established Clay Minerals among its competitors in the field at the time.
And we can still see the downloads of those papers, in some case decades on. Still people still interested in that work. Yeah, I think you can rightly be proud of that. Derek, what's your what's the thing you're proudest of as an editor?
I've been thinking about that one. I think it's not so much pride as just satisfaction in seeing the journal coming out, hopefully on time and with not too many issues with errata at the back, that kind of thing. But the special issues by Chris Jeans, I inherited that from David. They were very important issues and did create a lot of action that were extremely valuable. But I think my proudest moment as a MINSOC member was being made an honorary life fellow in 2008, I think it was, at a meeting in Aberdeen that Steve Hillier was organising, and that was just for my work generally for the group. But I think satisfaction in just getting things done, and helping people in their careers, getting their papers published in a reputable journal.
Thanks, Derek. Yeah, I think your dog obviously agrees with that sentiment in the background there.
Could you hear the dog? I'm sorry about that.
George, you're still a relative new boy at this game, only 10 years in, so you've still got some time to figure out what your proudest moment is, but you probably have something by now, I'm sure.
Well, as like Derek, I think it's not a matter of pride, but I would call it satisfaction as well. I'm glad that we managed to shift or to shift from the traditional way to the new system. Although this was not easy, at least in the beginning. So now that we know that the journal is on safer grounds, I think that we can build upon that. We still have some things to resolve, though.
Thank you. Well, we've arrived at the end of our hour. In fact, we've probably gone slightly further than we should have done. But I wanted to say thank you to the three of you for participating today and for managing the journal over the last 40 years. I think it's the unsung hero. I always say that in any society, it's the editors who do the vast bulk of the work. So thank you all for that and for chatting about it here today. I'm sure we'll have many interested people viewing on YouTube. So thanks, guys, and goodbye to you all.